Teams are out, folks, for test number one between the Wallabies and the British and Irish Lions. Let's go through them. Some of the big calls that have been made by Joe Schmidt and Andy Farrell. Some of the predictions, the stats and whatnot. And you guys can let us know your thoughts on how test match number one in Brisbane is gonna go. For the Wallabies, their prep for this tour has been rather limited, with just the one match against Fiji, which was a little bit of a closer call than some predicted. But first match is a little bit hard to gauge. Just ask the Lions how they went in their first match together. And sadly for the Wallabies, they lost Noah Lolesio in that game, who has been far and away Joe Schmidt's first choice 10 since he took over the Wallabies. So him being out in that Fiji game means we see Tom Lynagh have to start his first ever test. He has played for the Wallabies before, but only from the bench, against the British and Irish Lions in a test match. So a big pressure on that young man. And also worse news, I suppose, for them is that Rob Valentini, who's probably over the course of things, alongside a few other guys, but probably if you were going to single out one guy to have been the best Wallabies player over the last 18 months or even more, it'd probably be Rob Valentini. He's also unavailable for this one. He didn't even play in the Fiji game, if you remember. So yeah, he's apparently going to be fit for next week, alongside Big Will Skelton and Longy Gleeson. Lolasio's gone for the entire tour. But yeah, the ball carry and the size is certainly looking a little bit more limited with those guys who are out. But what about the guys who are in? He's gone with Slipper, Fassler, and Alaalatoa. So it's the same Brumbies propping duo who have been very good all season. Alaalatoa's been scoring tries. If you haven't been watching Super Rugby this year, he's not really known as a big try-scoring prop, but he's been getting a bit of white line fever for the Brumbies this year. And Matty Fassler is one of a few guys who's a little bit light on his game time. So his call is certainly an interesting one to see how he goes in terms of his match sharpness. Frost and Williams, that's the second row, obviously, minus Skelton, minus Darcy Swain. I think it's a duo that Joe's used a fair bit. They're both pretty useful in the line-out and both pretty high work rate guys in terms of their defensive count. And then you got Nick Champion de Grebney, who's going to be getting his first ever test match up against the British and Irish Lions. If you saw that match where the Force played the Lions, he did play in that one. So he has played these guys before. Not this exact team, but he's played the Lions before. So he knows what kind of level to expect. It's still a pretty big ask to fill the shoes of Rob Valentini. He's certainly got a different game, but he'll be looking to make himself busy around the paddock as well. Fraser McReight is genuinely one of the best sevens in the world. I'll put that out and say that. He's great on the tackle. He wins heaps of turnovers. He's a useful ball carrier and link-up man. So if you don't watch any Super Rugby, you don't watch any of the Wallabies, he's certainly the guy to look out for. And Harry Wilson, you feel like, will shoulder a fair bit of the burden on the ball carry in the absence of Valentini. And with a guy like Gus Bell starting on the bench, they are obviously focusing a little bit more on the scrummaging, a little bit less on the ball carry, are the Wallabies, with the way they've picked the starting forward pack. The backs, Gordon and Lynagh, that's the 19 combo. These guys don't play their club rugby together. You might have thought with young Tom Lynagh there, it might have made sense to pick Tate McDermott, who is this Reds teammate, to be, I don't know, something of a familiar hand. But no, it is the experienced campaigner Gordon who plays for the Tars, and youngster Tom Lynagh who plays for the Reds. We'll see what kind of chemistry those guys can generate together. Generally, Joe Schmidt's teams like to kick a bit more off 10, at least when he's been charged of the Wallabies. But with Jake Gordon there, who's got probably a better box kick on him than Tate McDermott, you may expect the experienced Jake Gordon to shoulder a little bit more of the exit burden from Lynagh. Ikitau and Suali'i is genuinely a classy midfield. Their battle up against the Hui Polotsu combo from the Lions is going to be sexy stuff. Suali'i is very much in his early days of his test career with the Wallabies, but if you saw that match where he played up against England, dude's got pretty silky offloads. He's good in the air, and Ikitau likewise has a very good skill set. So it is it's one of the better areas, I think, of this Wallaby squad. Potter, Jorgensen, and Wright. Jorgensen And I should say Suoliti as well, is another guy who's a little bit lacking in match game time because they were both missed the end of the Super Rugby season. But the one thing I do like about the outside backs, Potter, Jorgensen and Wright, is there's some genuine gas there. I think they've got the Lions for pure pace, if not with like maybe necessarily as much power or kicking distance in terms of like James Lowe's boot and whatnot, but they have got some gas in those outside backs, the Wallabies. Whether they get a chance to use them will obviously be one to watch. On the bench, they went with Pollard, Bell, and Robertson. So there's no Tupou. Tupou has not been in the greatest form, so I don't think that pick is entirely surprising. Pollard's been a bit of a demon from the maul, if you've seen the Brumbies play this year, so it is a weapon in the arsenal of the Brumbies forwards, and they've picked a few of them. And Gus Bell, like I mentioned, is genuinely one of the better ball-carrying props around in World Rugby. So look for him to add some impact from the bench. Tom Hooper and Tizano, both really high work rate guys. Tizano loves a maul try as well, to be fair. And then McDermott, I feel like, does serve the bench role better than the starter. But yeah, I feel like his partnership with Liner might have been worth something. Ben Donaldson and Andrew Callaway, the other two back replacements. Callaway is an interesting one because once he was released to play for the Tars, I kind of assumed he'd fall down the pecking order, but he can cover the outside backs and the midfield if needs be. For the Lions, obviously the Lions' choices are always kind of hot button issues. They've had a pretty good prep since they're arriving in Australia. They've won all their games. They flogged the Aussie and New Zealand team. They flogged the Reds. They flogged the Force. Games against the Brumbies and the Waratahs were a bit more competitive, and then they obviously started with a bit disjointed against the Pumas over in Europe, but that was maybe to be expected, and they had a bunch of guys unavailable for that game as well. But it seems to be ticking along pretty nicely. Andy Farrell's been able to build some of the combinations you felt like he's been wanting to see play some game time together. He is obviously also without some of his players that he might like to have available. I feel like Gary Ringrose being unavailable for this one maybe pushed him down the Scottish midfield route. Mac Hansen is another one who is unavailable with injury, but the side I don't think is hugely unpredictable. Jack Morgan is one guy that I feel like genuinely is unlucky because he's played very well. Like he's been doing the Michael Hooper thing that he used to do for the Wallabies in terms of Jack Morgan's effort for Wales. Like even when Wales have been playing poorly, Jack Morgan has still looked like a classy operator, but there's no room for him in the squad despite looking good for both Wales and the Lions since he's been putting on their jersey. Genge, Sheehan and Furlong, feel like that is a pretty heavy attacking looking starting front row in terms of like Genji and Sheehan. They've both got some ball carries in them. Obviously, it's going to be more about scrum time. Slips up against Furlong as a couple of real veterans up against each other. But yeah, I certainly think there's a bit more ball carry in the Lions front three. I mean, Sheehan is just... he's the X factor as far as hookers go in World Rugby right now. Itoje and McCarthy, I feel like, again, is probably one of the kind of predicted ones. I know there were a lot of talks about Byrne and Itoje being the preferred Lions lock and duo. I never really thought so. I figured he would probably put a big lump next to Itoje. I wasn't sure if it would be Chesum or McCarthy. In this case, it's McCarthy, but he's also doubled down with Byrne there in the number 6 jersey, which was... I mean, that's what I called it, but I don't know that that's much of a Nostradamus pick, given that that's the way he tends to like to pick his teams, Andy Farrell. Like, he likes to pair up Byrne with usually like a big guy like James Ryan or McCarthy. I mean, sometimes he does vary it up, but this one I feel like is relatively predictable. But I'm not saying that's a bad thing. The one guy I wasn't sure, I mean, Tom Curry. That's maybe a bit more experienced and a bit more of a known quantity at this level than maybe like a Jack Morgan. But I mean, whoever was picked in the number 7 jersey in the back row generally was gonna leave a bunch of other guys out. Like there's no Morgan I'm talking about, but there's also no Henry Pollock, there's also no Josh van der Fleer, and so on. Whoever was going to be picked in the back row for the Lions was going to mean a bunch of good players miss out. And like Jack Conan's even keeping Ben Earl on the bench. So they have got a lot of depth. And as I said, there's a lot of ball carriers like Genge, Sheehan, maybe McCarthy's a big physical unit. Curry and Conan as well. They've all got some carries about them. You might give that edge to the Lions for this one. Gibson, Park and Russell, that's the combo you feel like he wanted to see get some time together, and they have had that time together. I think they are starting to gel pretty nicely. Certainly been the most predicted 19 combo for the Lions since before the team was even selected. And then the Scottish midfield, like I said, with Ringrose' injury, was probably a little bit of an easier one to pick. Scotland got depth in midfielders for days as well, so that's very, very, very tasty looking viewing to see these two midfielders go up against each other. James Lowe with that big cannon boot of his on the left, Freeman on the right, and then Hugo Keenan in the fullback spot. You feel like they're pretty safe under the high ball, and as I said, they've got some big boots in there if they decide to use them, but probably not as pure quick as what we've seen from the Wallabies guys, although, you know, Keenan is kind of deceptively fast. Bench-wise, Kelleher, he was always, I feel like, a lock-on for that number 16 jersey, especially once Cowan-Dickie got injured. Porter and Stewart are the other two prop replacements. Chesham is the other kind of big lock on the bench, so you feel like Itoje is definitely going to go the 80. Ben Earl is there. Alex Mitchell was always another one seemingly destined for the bench role. Likewise, Marcus Smith. They've been deployed a lot, even on this tour itself, in those bench roles. And then Bundy Aki finds himself in the 23 jumper for this one. It is on at Brisbane. Kiwi Ben O'Keefe is the ref. That maybe gives a little bit more familiarity to the Wallabies guys, because they will be used to his refereeing style from his time in Super Rugby, more so than the Northern Hemisphere guys, but we will see. Lions are pretty decent favourites. The bookies are saying at least by 8, and the algorithm, the Rugby Forecast algorithm, was saying by 15. So, yeah, a really fresh face at number 10 for the Wallabies. Hopefully Jake Gordon's able to take a little bit of pressure off him in the kind of playmaking role. They've certainly got some hard tacklers, but the Lions have got a pretty physical looking pack who look to be aiming for a pretty relentless game. But we'll see what happens this first test this week. If you want Lions jerseys or Wallabies jerseys, check out the links to the Lions and Wallabies stores down in the description. They got all kinds of gear on, and usually having sales pre to these big kind of games. So check them out. They're affiliates of the channel. Use those links to tell them 2 cents Rugby sent you. But anyway, you guys let us know your thoughts on the tests, how it's going to go, and yeah, I'll talk to you guys again soon. See you later.